Hello, future people. Welcome to Getting Tabled. I'm Jason the Bruce, and today we're going to be checking out Delta 10 from Bonza Games. Yup, doesn't get much more Aussie than this. This is a game we've actually looked at on the podcast a couple of times, and every time I looked at it, I kind of went, that's really tempting to look at. I gave into the temptation on this December last year. It might have been November. This has actually been sitting waiting for an unboxing for a little while. I just haven't gotten to it because I've been kind of preoccupied with other things. If you have watched the most recent podcast, episode 99, you'll know what a lot of those things are. Otherwise, it's also I've kind of been trying to concentrate on the game that I'm working on. But this is a modern day warfare miniature game. There's not a lot of these, really. I mean, they are out there, but there's not a lot of them. Generally speaking, there tends to be two camps as far as these is concerned. Generally speaking, people tend to be under the camp of they'd like to see more of it, and they'd like to see like something really take off. And there are other people that are just kind of like, I don't know how comfortable I am with that. And I'm not here to, like, there's no wrong answer as far as that's concerned. There's no wrong answer there at all. This is kind of concentrating on a fictional modern war. So this is the equivalent of your modern warfare games, basically. This is COD. So, very much looking forward to having a look at this. Just opening the base set today. And so as far as Aussie games is concerned, like, if you've ever met anybody from Australia, like, Bonza is very much an Aussie term. Like, they're not trying to hide this at all. Artwork on this is absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if the person that's painted this gets credit, but whoever you are, this is stunning work. It might be one of their staff members, it might not be. I don't know, but this is stunning. As far as cover art is concerned, from Australia, this is the best looking cover art to a game coming out of our country that I've seen so far. Which is not to discredit other companies. Like, you guys know that I'm a fan of a number of them. But as far as artwork is concerned, this takes the cake at this stage. On the back, we get a look at our minis. Just a simple look of what I assume is the 3D sculpts. It's a D10 game. Yeah, D10s. D10s tend to treat me very nicely. So we get 12 minis, 12 reference cards, obviously for the minis, 36 wound cards, 36 tactical cards, 3 command cards, 5 10-sided dice, 4 order generators, 6 scenery containers, wounds, stress, and game tokens, and a learn to play guide. 2 players, 20 to 60 minutes. That's pretty good, honestly. 14 plus, I think that's probably fair given the content of the game. Postcard size artwork. This is the same as the front cover of the box. Thank you for your support. Green Zone coming in 2021. I'll have to have a look to see if that is out or not. Given what's happened since then, I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't. But we will find out. These, I suspect, will be our miniatures. Now, first thing that's interesting, we get black D10 instead of the regular white ones that were shown on the back. I actually don't mind that. I quite like black dice. So these, I believe, have something to do with the dial that we saw on the back. A couple of decks of cards. Learn to play guide. We're going to look at this first. And some card terrain. And there's our tokens, so that we'll come back to those. All right. Are these calibrated for Australian shores? I think that's pretty good. I mean, we do have a single Bruce, but we've got we've got a fairly decent even spread, and it's actually trending high. Again, beautiful cover art here. Very different sort of image on this one, but just absolutely gorgeous. We're not going to fully read this. We're just going to kind of go through the basics. Layout's quite nice. I'm liking how this looks, honestly. I'm not reading it. I'm just skimming through just to see generally how the layout looks. Seems pretty straightforward. So this is just the Learn to Play guide. My understanding is that there is a full rulebook that's available on their website to download. We will not be looking at that today, but by all means, I will put the link down in the description as always, and you should be able to find it through there, as well as any other items that they have. This looks really nice. Totally Kivshar. You, my friend, are absolutely phenomenal with your artwork. I love that. Whole heap of playtesters. Yep, there we go. Full rules are available there, and that will be the link that I'll be putting down the bottom anyway. I like this. I like that they actually have playtesters actually listed here. No names that I recognise, but this is from Queensland, so that would be why. I mean, I do know people in Queensland, but... nice. Quick reference. Every miniature game should have a quick reference guide. So, we get 6 cardboard containers, 3 of the orange ones and 3 of the red ones. The design is pretty much the same, with the exception of the graffiti is slightly different. There's nothing pre-cut on this. You're going to have to cut this out and stick it together yourself. But honestly, it doesn't look that difficult. Just make sure that you're careful and that you take your time. Don't rush this. I would probably cut around generally first and then go in and get the fine detail later. And then you're folding along the lines, gluing things together. It should be straightforward. I like this tip. Adding foam core or something to the inside to make it more sturdy. That will make them last longer. Tokens. Now this is where those plastic clips come in. So, my understanding is that you have one of these for each of your fire teams. I'm going to call them fire teams. It may not be what they're called in the rules. And basically what you're doing is that you are putting these on to show what the order is that you're going to give. These are brand new, so they haven't quite been stretched to size yet. But I want these guys to advance so that it clearly shows what it is. And so basically you're just moving this around and you're putting it on whichever order it is that you want your guys to be following for that turn. It's pretty straightforward. You'll have red for one team, blue for the other. Red versus blue. We've got a few different tokens here. Rally, Cautious, Overwatch, Fire Mission, Reloading, and I don't know what that is. Some sort of... I'm guessing that this is some sort of token for like the assumed height of a miniature or something. But I don't know. That's a guess. So in this we have that. And that. So this is going to be wound and something. And in here we have tactical cards. And then reference cards. And then commanding orders. So I think we'll start with the commanding orders. So here we have a light mortar. It's got 4 uses. It's from the command model, and it comes out in the tactical phase. You can read the rest of this for yourself if you would like. We have an aggressive action. You can only use this once. Doesn't apply to any particular model. Again, tactical. And the last one is tactical guile. 1 use. Doesn't matter which model, and it's order and initiative. So they are the 3 cards that you have in your command cards. These 2 are specific to their factions. That one appears to be for anybody. We will go through these briefly. I don't know how this game works at this stage, so it's going to be more of a how do I feel about the layout type situation. I quite like it. I assume this is the mini that it's representing, which I quite like. I like it when the images on the art directly reference what you're looking at on the table. So if it's not a photo of the mini, which quite frequently isn't, then it's artwork that represents that mini very clearly. Got a corporal. Again, I quite like this layout, honestly. Medic. Rifleman. Another rifleman. Another rifleman. And now we're into the other guys. So we got a sergeant there. Commissar. Strelok. Pulsamitica. I'm not going to try and say that again. Another Strelok. And one final Strelok. So the Strelok, I assume, is the equivalent of your rifleman. And here we have our tactical cards. So in here we have Stop. We have Clear Stress. We have a Wound card reflip. We have Reactions. And we have Command Orders. I assume that these get shuffled and that you would be holding so many each that would allow you to essentially like break the game in some way and do something you normally wouldn't be allowed to do. Such as, for example, I don't like that wound card, I'm going to get a different one. And then hope that it's not worse. Speaking of, oh, hang on. We've got 2 different piles here. So we'll look at these ones first. Oh, no. There we go. So they're part of the wound deck as well. So all that is the same. I suspect that means that you've managed to avoid it. That's probably the wound. And that's probably increasing your stress or taking the wound if you can't afford to do it. I'm guessing at this stage. I do want to make that clear. Cardstock is quite nice, honestly. They don't feel cheap in any way. They actually do feel quite nice in the hand. It's like a nice semi-gloss feel. I quite like these. I don't know where they come from, but they've very clearly gotten a quality supplier. I quite like this. They don't feel cheap at all. And this is something that board games do frequently cheap out on. All right. So we'll open up the NATO troops first. I quite like this. I mean, essentially this is a fairly cheap box, but it's got the print for the faction on it, which helps it helps it feel more expensive than it is. I quite like this because from a starting business, you're trying to make your stuff look as professional as possible without the costs being too much to keep up with. So I think they've kind of found a nice middle ground there. Bases are all fairly standard slaughter bases, 25mm ones. You've got the 5 that you need, and in the bottom you've got a little bit of foam just to keep everything nice and secure. No, I stand corrected. There's 6 of them. So this is your usual white metal. Really, really nice detail on this, actually. Really nice. Sculpting has been done really well. Where you have your connection points, we've got nice clear indicators so that things will fit nice and securely. So we've got the head. It's going to be difficult to show the head. Facial details slightly softer, but it is still quite nice. It should show up quite nicely under so you'll fit that in, and like if you're gentle you'll feel it pop in basically. And then finally straighten it out a little bit. It is a little bit twisted, this one. So most of these poses are like fairly stationary type poses. There's not a lot of action poses in them from what I understand. And that's quite deliberate because it's meant to look like everybody's on patrol type thing, much like they would be in a video game before they are alerted to your presence. I kind of like that because it's a little bit different. Like everything like just feels like it would in real life. Rather than trying to pose them and stuff, I might just show off the pieces and I'll come back later in the video and show you them built. So again, nice detail here in the white metal. I'm trying to avoid shadows as best I can. The folds in the fabric are really nice. The pack feels like something you would have seen in real life. The slots are a little bit loose. Nothing too drastic, but they don't fit perfectly. The inside of the arm here. So we still have all of the detail you would expect. Despite the fact that you're only really going to... Oh, actually, no, it will be out like that, so you will see both sides. He's holding a grenade in his hand by the look of it. Or a trigger for a grenade that he's planted, maybe. The heads are going to continually be the hardest thing to show off, unfortunately, because they are so small. This is true scale 28mm. So my fingers are going to be in the way pretty much constantly on these. There is a little bit of cleanup around most of the helmet heads there. Where it's a little like that's just where it's been in the mold, and that's fine. It's nothing too drastic. That looks like that's a gate that's been cut off, maybe a little bit too sharply. This needs to be taken to with a file, and you'll be able to round that back off again. Depends on how much it annoys you. Again, continual nice detail on these. Like they very clearly belong together because they are all wearing the same gear, and you would expect them to be. This guy has some goggles on his protection there. Nice detail. Appears to have the same. That might actually be part of the design of the helmet, perhaps. Maybe that's not where a sprue gate's been cut off. Maybe it's not supposed to be perfectly round. Might be a question to ask Socks, because I mean, he's not in the army or NATO, but he is in the Air Force, and therefore he would be familiar with what some of them are carrying. So we've got a slightly more complicated one here because we do have a hand connected to the gun. So that's going to have to be glued in 2 spots, that particular arm. Shouldn't be too hard. So this guy appears to be kind of half in a stride here. Again, really nice detail. I really, really like this stuff. Yeah, okay. I'm convinced at this stage that this is actually part of the design of the helmet quite deliberately. I don't think they are actually gates. Like I said, it's something I'd have to confirm with Socks. Whether these are supposed to be perfectly round or not. But that exact detail has been on every single one. So that leads me to believe that it must be part of the actual design. and not just a gate that's been removed. Again, we've got another two-parter here, so this is another one where the arm's going to have to be glued in two places. And again, it's stunning. Again, this guy's striding. He's got a little bit of a wider stance on this one. He's very clearly in the middle of his patrol. Maybe he's heard a noise and he's gone to check it out. I like the straps and everything and the pockets and everything. It's really nice. I mean, it doesn't look like pockets like in your 90s cartoon, in your 90s comic books. Like, all of this is tactical gear as you would expect. Again, I'm not a member of the military, but I've seen enough stuff to know what a proper tactical gear piece actually looks like. This arm feels a little bit chunkier because he's got a bigger gun. Very nice. And again, it's another two-parter, so this is another one that you're going to have to glue in two places. So this is our first one that does seem to have a different pose. This is very clearly our medic by the look of that, because that's definitely a medic's backpack. And they're definitely kneeling down to tend to someone. This gun is the first gun we've had that's not being held by the user. It's in a more stationary point. So that's how that gun goes. He's reaching back to grab it from his pack, or he's leaning it down while he attends to his patient. Again, I'm going to build these off camera properly just so you can see it properly, but I suspect that that's probably there. Something like that, because he's tending to somebody on the ground. And then we have the last of our heads. The facial details are a little bit softer on these, but that's because the heads are smaller. I really, really like them though.
Sorry to interrupt the video, but I want to tell you about the competition that we're running through our Patreon. For every month of support you give our Patreon, from now until April, you will receive one entry into the competition that we're running to win a Shaltari fleet for Drop Fleet Commander. That includes a Shaltari Dreadnought, a Shaltari Starter Set, a Shaltari Frigates box, and a Shaltari Cruisers box. All of this will be sent to one winner. This winner will be drawn at random on our 4th anniversary, which is recorded at the beginning of April. For us to be allowed to send this to you, you need to fit 2 categories. You must be living in a country where it's legal for me to post you something from Australia. You also must be living in a country where it is legal to win competitions. If you do not live in a country that meets these criteria, then I do apologise. There's nothing that I'll be able to do, and I will be forced to redraw it. Please consider supporting us. We'd really appreciate it. All of this was purchased with my own money. No pay.
All right, and we're getting into our NAS troops now. So, first one. Got a bit of a sprue gate that needs to be removed there. Arms are look like they're supposed. He looks like he's in a he's standing at ease type thing. It's going to be a little bit difficult to get in place, I think. I suspect you're going to have to bend these out and then bend them back in. It's going to be a question of which way they're supposed to go. I think they're supposed to go that way. Yep. Judging by how the hands are being held, it's going to be like that. Really, really like this head. So he's wearing more of a balaclava type thing. He's got a lot of his face covered, but I quite like that. This appears to be our commissar. Lovely, lovely uniform. Love the flowing of the trench coat there. She does not have any technical gear on her head. Clearly she's too important for such menial things. She's got to look like she's in charge. Somebody that's not used to how war works, and they're very clearly used to sitting behind a desk, I suspect. And then we've got one hand here holding a pistol. I quite like that, actually. That's really nice. Nice and direct. Feels very confident in the way that it's being held. And this one's ready to sock somebody in the face. Maybe she's not used to sitting behind a desk. She very much looks like she's used to how these are used. I love the sculpting of that in particular. That's really nice. Like it's really firm. Another bit of a stationary pose here. Someone's on guard. Again, this is another head that is very much balaclavaed. All you're going to need to do is just be a little bit careful with how you paint the balaclava. I would probably do the eyes first and then come back in for the balaclava. Really, really, really nice. Looks like he's going to kind of be like this. This guy is in the middle of pacing. Again, really nice tactical detail on this. Something slightly weird on the fold there. It's probably the first mold line I would say that I've come across. And like mold lines are fairly normal. We've got like the leftover of a gate here. These heads continue to be quite hard to show on camera. I'm going to try and get these glued together and hopefully be able to get them in a way that's easier to see. This one appears to be just a regular straight head though. There's no balaclava on this guy by the look of it. This one has quite a large sprue gate on him. So you're just going to want to trim that off nice and carefully. Really nice detail though. There's actually another one there underneath the magazine too. And then finally, his last arm. Like the detail on these is just amazing. Really nice solid pieces. Really, really cool. So this is almost the same as the previous one. Almost. This guy does have the balaclava back though. Yeah. Really, really good. And we've got somebody else in a kneeling pose here. Doesn't appear to be a medic. I'm assuming that this is just somebody that's kneeling down to shoot. Yep. Yeah, by the look of the way that gun's being held, they're definitely kneeling down to shoot. And it's a machine gun too. Look at that drum barrel. Or the drum magazine, rather. That's really nice. I love the sight. Nice chunky sight on that. It's another two-part arm, so this will have to be glued in two spots. Onto the wrist that's holding the gun and onto the shoulder. And Another face with the balaclava. All right, so I'm going to get off and I'm going to glue those together now, and I'll be back with you with film from tomorrow. Now, it has actually been a little bit longer since I've spoken to you. I know I said it would be a day, but another thing arrived that I wanted to get finished first. Also, I ran out of super glue. But here we are going through the actual models after they've been built. As you can see, like, the detail is just as good as we was expecting it to be. I mean, looking at the unbuilt models made that pretty clear. But the detail is just absolutely phenomenal. Got another guy here. I'm going to go through these one at a time, just nice and slow, just giving you a chance to actually go through. Now, I couldn't get this arm to go in quite as well. I kind of had a little bit of problems with the joint on this arm. I might actually end up breaking this apart and cutting that knob off entirely. The nub doesn't seem to be the right... It doesn't seem to have come out the right shape. Basically, I mean, it still looks fine. Basically, he's supposed to be kind of reaching into one of those pockets there, is the way that he's built. Gorgeous model, though. A little bit more standard, this one. I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of these, and I know it's a standard thing, but these models where you have to glue in multiple places to get it to sit right, because it just never really seems to agree with me on metal models. I don't seem to have as much problem with it on plastic. Just generally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of metal models, so I do have a bias here. But as you can see, as I've been building, I had a little bit of trouble getting everything to sit in the right place, just because of the difficulty there. It's just something I've always found frustrating about miniatures. This, however, says more about me as a hobbyist than it does about the game itself, I think. It's just these two joint glue position things have always disagreed with me. Same sort of thing here, but it's happened on the other shoulder. It's actually not quite as bad on this one, because there's a couple of gaps on this one anyway. Everything has kind of built really nicely. And honestly, that gap that's there, honestly, it kind of just looks like that's where the jacket is. I mean, a hobbyist is going to see it, but it doesn't look that bad, honestly. Almost through the good guys now. This one did build much easier. As you can see, when it comes to these ones, I don't have anywhere near as much trouble. There was a couple of models where I had to snip off nubbins to get everything to fit right. I don't remember exactly which ones they were. This guy in particular was quite frustrating to get right, just because, like, you had to kind of separate this out to get everything to fit right without stretching it too far that it would go out of shape, because then when you try to squeeze it in, you're never going to get it to sit right. I managed to get this to go really well, honestly. This particular mini broke on me several times as I was trying to build it, just because of how small and fine those arms are. It's kind of, I find, something very common with female models in your true 28mm. It happens with female models in Infinity quite a bit too. Also, is that something that I should be... I've got a bit here that I need to cut off. My apologies. We've got a number of the models on this one where we've got these dual pickups. That one's bent ever so slightly. One of the benefits of metal models is that you can just kind of do that for the most part. Still going through here. This is probably one of my favourite poses, honestly. What you'll notice is a lot of these models are kind of like they're just in ready for action poses, as opposed to, I mean, this is probably the closest to being in the middle of a shot we have. And he more looks like he's on lookout than anything else. Every so often, I'll come across a set of miniatures where they seem to be doing something that nobody else is doing with their minis. So Moonstone comes to example for mind, because it's very much in your
whimsical fantasy as opposed to your high fantasy. And this, because it's trying to aim at the video game crowd, like not everything is in the middle of a super action pose. That you get, like, this guy is just clearly just doing his rounds and being on watch. I quite like that because you just don't see it. People are quite quick to judge on like minis that are kind of just standing there because a lot of them start feeling like they're all the same after a while. But sometimes you will get a resting pose that just really looks nice. And I like having variation. Not everything has to be super action posy. I really like this. I think it works really well. But there's one mini in particular that I suspected might have been my favourite, and that's why I skipped it until now. And I was right. I love this thing. I have to admit, building this here was a little bit more frustrating than I was expecting it to be. Just getting it to sit right. I kept on knocking this off as I was building him. But absolutely phenomenal. So, there we have the full set. Like I said, I'm a big fan of these. I think they look phenomenal. They obviously will look a lot better with some paint on them. But when it comes down to it at the end of the day, this game is phenomenal. I really enjoyed building the minis. I mean, there was a couple of them that I found frustrating, but like I said, that says a little bit more about me as a hobbyist than it does about the game itself. The models are gorgeous, among some of the best in the industry, and this is a small, tiny little company. These are phenomenal. Like, they really are. And given that, like, a lot of these, like, they're just standing there. They shouldn't look as good as they do. But every character has life in it. Despite a lot of them, like I said, just standing there, not actually doing anything. If you're into your modern stuff, if you're someone that's on that side of, I really would love to see something more modern day, honestly, I think this is one that you need to get your eyes on.